I've repetitiously covered the harmony and the concurrent disharmony or assonance in our legislation here in the state, and as delegated and directed to us in the federal constitution of the country. So the 10th Amendment, in terse language, explicates to us that it's either the powers not delegated, has to be both, not delegated nor prohibited. So the prohibition that is found in the Constitution, thus excised from 10th Amendment powers, are things such as the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, none of that. The 2nd Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. No law passed in the respect to the establishment of religion, freedom of speech cannot be abridged, etc. Those are prohibited, and the 9th Amendment tells us that, of course, you can't use any other right or enumeration or power in the Constitution to deny or disparage, or thus come into conflict with any other rights that an individual or people have, retained by the people. Of course, they're all retained until they are taken away through due process. And the powers, some things, you can temporarily remove the privacy of an individual or individuals or people in the course of an investigation through the 4th Amendment or state laws in pursuance thereof. So the 4th within itself delegates a power that says, I don't violate the 9th. You may temporarily remove privacy through me. It's power delegated. It's self-explained in the 4th Amendment. So the state of California, and I'm hoping no other states in our union, has passed laws that have become violative of the 9th Amendment. One such example is my personal experience, and that is through mental health. Now, aside from the fact that the state of California, through the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Department and the Stockton Police Department, and the degree or echelon and advancement of technology being used on me, that the government here refuses to admit, hiding behind mental health, is using on me. And then the misconvictions and planted mental health diseases or misdiagnoses therefrom are the laws that now abridge speech and enforce religion. That's what I've had happen to me. Something else is going on here, and it appears as if there are people who follow me everywhere. I mean, it's not just an appearance. This is really happening. I am being stalked, followed, harassed, and either way, it's criminal. But there's nothing in the Constitution that permits for it either. Even if someone was to claim a warrant, per se, or let's say. The 4th Amendment, when temporarily removing the privacy of an individual or individuals in the course of an investigation that through good faith, ought to be done in a direction of the criminal investigation. It may not be used to violate any other rights because the Ninth Amendment tells us that, and the Fourth Amendment doesn't delegate that power. It just says you may temporarily remove an individual's privacy or individuals in the course of an investigation. And then, of course, you have to follow all the things that it sets out. So we have documents, papers, persons, effects, places, etc. All the property and whatnot. So, now in the state of California and its peace officers arrest an individual for freedom of speech understood to be in a non-criminal format, and calls it a mental health crime. What you've done is nothing other than used the 10th Amendment without regard to the 9th, and thus the first as well, called it mental health, and said we not only get to remove your non-criminal freedom of speech, which is what freedom of speech is, but we may enforce our religious ideology. Now, the Stockton Police Department not only detained me, but arrested me for non-criminal freedom of speech. Claimed that they do not die and live eternally. These were the reasons given for my arrest. So because of this, a judge in Stockton then ruled that the Constitution makes no sense because I recited it. Well, I have a Federal Amendment 1 right to freedom of speech, and I have an Article 1, Section 2 right in the state of California, again to freedom of speech. And it says that I may publish my sentiments on any topic. I did so. There was no abuse of speech. I committed no crime. After adjudicating on the matter that I make no sense and that the Constitution is not de jure nor supreme, involuntary medicine was then ruled for and administered. And I'm not for certain, it would be on record, I think it was for bipolarity. So because of my freedom of speech and no crying and laughing found anywhere as proof, I was arrested and administered liquid chemical bipolarity medicine through a needle. And I was imprisoned for 9 days. Now, these result in false imprisonments as well. So, constitutionally and lawfully speaking, what must happen in the state of California and throughout the United States, both intrastate and interstate, is a reviewing, revising, and repealing of all 10th Amendment laws that are used in this manner that become violative of the 9th. Mental health will become voluntary only. There is no such thing as a civil arrest for non-criminal behavior. Now, the federal Constitution of the United States of America speaks to the entire country. And when it speaks to the entire country, it speaks to all 50 states at once. And of course, the preamble sets out that we are doing this in order to form a more perfect union. Union, not division. So this would be an example of how the federal Constitution, on both the 10th and the 9th, working together, provide us with equal protection and a harmony of our rights and a protection of our civil liberties. Now, at the interstate level, we have 50 states. And an example of this is, and I'll give a hypothetical, keep it very general, but it follows the same formula. I'm in California. You may not go from California to Arizona, Nevada, or any other state and lose a right that you have in California. And the reason is the 10th Amendment endows us with certain rights. One of those is democracy. The other one is any right that is passed through democracy or legislation. Without democracy, which sometimes happens at the state level. So, because the 10th Amendment is a part of the enumeration, as found in the text of the 9th Amendment, and it also extends certain rights to us. And if there's any disagreements that the 10th Amendment or disagreement does not imbue us with certain rights, then as a president, I would say, I'm just going to remove all of your 10th Amendment rights. You're claiming they aren't even certain. Of course, we have this ever repetitive circumstance revolving around the redundancy in the 14th Amendment of immunities and privileges and due process. And because of that, I always use my all-powerful argument. Well, you never understood the 10th to begin with because of the 14th. So let's hope we don't have to go down that route, but these are just my power positions. So the interstate unity, United States, is found within the 10th and the 9th. that can be found in equal protection as well, because that speaks to all 50 states, not just one. So when we look at the Constitution, we think of it as both inter and intra. So if I lose a right, it's a violation of the 9th. And what's happening is there is an interstate 10th Amendment conflict. Our states' rights are not in harmony with one another. We're becoming divided. And the longer it goes on, the more separated and divided that we become. So, where this exists at, these errors must be found, rooted out, and either repealed or proliferated to all 50 states. And our government as an interstate mechanism involving all 50 respective state governments is supposed to, through the 10th Amendment, expand the rights of all of our people together. Which is why we're supposed to be the freest country in the world with more liberties than anybody. When it's effectively operating correctly, what we have are 50 different governments. And all the people of those corresponding states working constitutionally to expand our rights as a country. So that when you go from California to Arizona or Nevada, you have that right or those same rights in those other states. And as always, the repealing of the redundancy of due process and immunities and privileges in the 14th must happen. I've covered the numerous interpretations of state extension and the reconstitution and reinforcement of every amendment and article, their sections and corresponding powers and rights. And of course, if due process and immunities and privileges had to be extended to the state level, where were they at before? And since nothing else was extended to the state level, who has them? Now, of course, the United States Constitution, these are all the different ways that it's extended to the state level, tells us, see, all these articles and amendments. So I'm delegating these to the states. And the 10th Amendment comes in and goes, that's my operative function. I'm implicitly telling you all of these are delegated. Now, anything that's not in here, and also isn't said to be prohibited, is up to you and your people. So due process was not prohibited, and nowhere does it say it's not delegated. Immunities and privileges extends itself to the state level within its own text. So the joke I make is, well, then I'm going to have to extend everything in here to the state level on the 28th. And since nobody understood the 10th, well, then I'm going to have to extend the 10th Amendment to the state level. How can we be sure that's delegated to the states? Because like immunities and privileges, it says it is. So those are some of the major problems occurring in your country and why we are experiencing so much dissonance and disharmony rather than a more perfect union and harmony. Our rights aren't in sync. Constitution isn't being comprehended. But, as always, you shouldn't listen to anything that I'm saying. My physical appearance is schizophrenia. And telling the truth results in delusions and evidence and substance. They just aren't necessary, and we don't need them. I live in the state of California. The Mental Health Supremacy Clause. All laws to the contrary are notwithstanding.